Ron and Richard, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk to me today. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us about what your role is at the museum?
I'm Richard Gibson. I've been with the museum since 1978 and I am a trustee of the museum.
I'm Ron Batley. Yes, I've been here just a little longer than Richard, going back to 1977. Really, I was a founder member with Mike Harvey of the Control Tower project way back in 1977.
Everyone has a unique story about how they became involved with the tower project. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about how you first became involved.
Right. Well, you know, Matt, I was like Richard. We were born, well, just at the end of World War II. So when we were growing up, we were hearing stories about the American forces who were here, the aeroplanes that were in the sky, from my mum and dad, the servicemen they met in the local pub. I mean, Mum did laundry for some of the airmen. The huts on the old airfield were still intact, of course. People were living in them, but the war had only been over, say, 10, 15 years, so there was lots of talk about the Americans here and what they did and the friendships that were made. And I was always fascinated to hear these stories and perhaps learn a little bit more of what went on here at Thorpe Abbots, which perhaps we can go into later. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Needham, which is possibly a lot of you have heard of the next village to Thorpe Abbots, which is Broctish. I know that you've had quite a few photos on your foundation website of Broctish. Well, the next village beyond that is Needham, and that's where I was born. So, which is about 4 miles, I guess, as the crow flies. And the oldest I could have been when the 100 were here is 3 years old. My growing up days, my dad would keep telling me stories of, just like Ron, he was hearing stories of these American guys who were here during the war and flying these 4-engine aircraft. And of course, later on, I realized that they were B-17s. But I got the impetus through stories, basically, of what that my father had told me. And then later on in years, I read in the local paper that some local enthusiasts were going to restore the control tower at Thorpe Abbots. And I thought, hello, what's all this about? So I got in my car and drove up and saw these people, and I could see that some of the work was being done by possibly people who it wasn't their trade, so to speak. And I've always been in the building trade. That was my trade. So I introduced myself and told them what I did, and they more or less nailed me to a tree in case I got away. And so I was a little bit useful in the early days. I don't do so much of that now, but that is how I started. And that was 1978 and Ron 1977. So we've both been here quite a few years. We're getting to know our way around now.
I've always been impressed by the photos I've seen of the restoration. Ron, you wearing coveralls, clearing the brush. Richard, you doing masonry work. Could you tell us a bit about the extensive work that went into that project?
Well, of course, when we first took this project on and got permission to restore the tower, it was in a pretty poor state. Of course, it had had no maintenance of any sort since World War II, the end of World War II. There were weeds, there was undergrowth growing up the side, in through the windows and across the floor. The rendering on the brickwork was crumbling. the roof, asphalt covering was broken and coming off. It looked a poor old thing, if that's the right word, but it was structurally sound. And at the time, as Richard would agree with me, when we started this, you know, we had no monies available to do anything here. And I remember saying to Mike Harvey, when he came to see me the very first time, to ask if I might be interested in helping him and perhaps a group to restore. I said, how in the world are we going to do something like this? It's in a poor shape and we have no monies whatsoever. And I know Mike said, I'm sure we can work our way around that. And actually we did, because in the early days, Mike himself came up with all sorts of ideas to raise funds by having all sorts of events and things. And so that's really how we started to raise funds for the museum that was to be.
You're right, yeah. The early restoration, the main project obviously was the control tower, and the outside of it we needed to keep the weather out. And it was the rendering, I know you call it stucco in the States, but it was the rendering that was, some of it was held on very tight and some of it was very loose. And the way you sort of determined which was the loose, you just walk over it or go scrape over it with a hard implement like a hammer, and you can soon tell when it sounds hollow. And if it sounds hollow, then it needs to come off. And when we took the old rendering off, obviously we had to put the new back on. But when you put new onto old, there's always a joint where you join new to old all the way around. And then, which was good for a start, but after a while, weather would then get in behind that. When we were taking the rendering off on the eastern side of the tower, we could see holes in the brickwork, which in my builder's brain told me that there were some rocks or some stones in the actual clay that the bricks were made from. And when you get frost get behind there, water get behind the stones, the frost pop it out, and that would then make a hole. But then it wasn't until we started to hear the history of the 100 bomb group that we heard this story of the ball turret, the runaway ball turret out on hard stand 10. And where this guy was taking the guns or doing something out, and the turret started to revolve, and the .50 was shooting in all directions. So we think possibly that some of those holes that I thought was bombed frost damage was in fact bullet holes, because that made things much more exciting. So
yeah. So, but besides the stucco rendering, as Richard said, I mean, all the windows, I think, were broken. I don't think there was a pane of whole glass in the whole place. Of course, over the years, the kids come along, and that was a good place to play in. And of course, there was plenty of rocks, stones and bricks around, so I think every window got broken. And as I was saying to Richard earlier, after World War II, and the farmers were starting to take over the airfield and plough it up for crops again, they were using the control tower to house pigs, believe it or not. And there were pigs in the lower floor area, and up in the top floor, and even on the top, they stored the hay and straw for the bedding for the pigs. Although, and so, like I said, it needed a good clean up inside. The windows, like I said, were broken, but we were able to clean and restore those windows. They were painted in red oxide paint, new glass installed, wasn't there?
Oh yeah.
And eventually we got the place what we would call waterproof to a degree.
Richard, I've seen many of the photos you've taken over the years, especially some of those in the early 1980s of veterans returning to Thorpe Abbotts. You had a lot of photos of the original dedication as well. And I was wondering, what do you guys remember about that day?
I mean, when we were restoring the control tower, we knew that there were a whole bunch of veterans in the States. Obviously, we didn't know. And or we got to know quite a few of them when we went to the San Antonio reunion. 3 of us went there, Ron, myself, and Mike Harvey, and we met quite a few of the veterans there. And then the 1983 one was organized, and we knew quite a few of the faces who were coming along. But we've got some lovely photos, and I'm sure you've seen some of them, where the veterans are actually coming up the driveway. They've got off the bus and they're walking up the driveway. I think there's even a picture of me in amongst of them. And that was such a lovely feeling to see all these guys visiting their old base. And the most moving thing I think about that reunion was we had organized Sally B, the B-17 that is based at Duxford, to do a flyover, but we kept everything a secret. And how we got everybody to the front of the tower was we said that the local newspaper, the Norwich-based Eastern Daily Press, are coming out to do a photo of all you sitting on and around the control tower. So we got everybody out there at a certain time and said, you know, if you can just stay there, because we got the press coming in a minute. We knew darn well that there weren't going to be any press at all. But what you did hear in the distance was these right cyclo engines whirling in the distance. And this B-17 came over. And that was the most wonderful sight to see these guys in awe of what they were seeing. They were already in awe of what they're seeing at the museum, the tower itself, you know, being renovated by us. They couldn't make out why we would give up all our free time to do that for them. But anyway, I've sort of jumbled that up a bit, but that's all that sort of made that very, very special. The V-17 flying over and seeing their faces and them being in awe of what we had done to keep their memory alive.
I was saying to Richard, I remember standing on the tower. I think, I'm not certain we were at the top or on the balcony. I was standing beside Norm Graham, who was the lead navigator. Norm was a big guy. He stood about quite a lot taller than I. And when the B-17 was flying around, I was hanging onto the rails. My legs were going like jelly. I had a lump in my throat, and I think the tears were starting to come down my face. Like I said, the lump in my throat, tears started to come down the eye, and Norm Graham was standing, Ron, come on, what the hell is up with you? Pull yourself together. Look, and I said, this is just something I shall remember the rest of my life. To be there with those fellows who had flown these things for real and had to go to war from here to save my mum and dad's skin and mine also, no doubt, was just very special to me. I'll never forget it.
Richard and Ron, can you tell us about the special bond that exists between the people of East Anglia and the veterans of the 8th Air Force?
Well, Ron and I were talking about that earlier. we had a video that we made called "All Our Stories," and it was based on what you're now saying about the people who were youngsters then. They are now telling their stories, and because these people who are telling the stories are in their 80s, and they did have a special bond with the Americans back then. But a lot of these people aren't here now. That's the thing. So so you've really got people such as Ron and I, and you know, people of our ilk, who really didn't know the Americans back then. But there are still a lot of people around who do remember the Americans being here. And when they first came over, they had to get used to these brash people coming over here who had all this money. And they were the first Americans that they'd ever seen. The only Americans they knew were the ones on the movie screen. And it was great to have these people here sounding like the people on the movie screen, you know, with their accent. And there was a special bond between them, the Americans, and these British people. And they were very, very sorry when the Americans left. What you need to realize is this little hamlet of Thorpe Abbots and adjoining Billingford, I guess maybe if you add all the inhabitants together, would there be 100 people? I don't think so.
A couple of hundred at the most.
Yeah. All of a sudden, they were invaded by all these trucks that were going around all these skinny little roads, and all these about 3,000 Americans were suddenly here. I mean, that's a lot to get used to. But they were here for 2 years, and the Americans were here for 2 years, as you know, and they did get used to it, and they were very sorry when they left. And with all this hubbub of the aeroplanes flying over, starting up in the early mornings, all these trucks whizzing around, jeeps whizzing around that these Brits have got used to, all of a sudden they were gone. And apparently they can then start hearing birds singing again. That was lacking for about 2 years. And but it was an unusual bond and a special bond between us and them.
Yeah. But you know, Matt, it's over the years, the American forces coming through England is known as the friendly invasion. I mean, most of the people who invaded the British Isles, England, over the centuries have been not too friendly to us. But when these guys came, the local population felt that they were here for a special reason, to help to get this war over and finished. So, yes, and this special bond developed, i.e. they could speak English, which helped, although perhaps in a different accent. And this, yeah, so on that basis, it is still known as the friendly invasion. Well, they've become known as the friendly invasion. There's still a lot of affection for the Americans and what they did. And of course, we know that by the people who come and visit our museum here, and also all the other 8th Air Force museums in the local area. Even there's a younger generation still coming along who want to know more and learn more about just what went out here, happened out here on these farm fields, and the young men who served here.
You all have had countless visits from veterans and their families over the years, and I was wondering, are there any particular visits that stand out to you?
There's just so many, Matt.
Difficult. Very difficult.
Other than those who came at the actual little reunions, well, biggie reunions we had here. But even when we were here, perhaps cutting the grass or doing work on the tower in the 80s, especially, perhaps a veteran would turn up and just said, "Hi guys, what are you doing?" or something. I served there in World War II, and so we were getting surprise visits. I remember a man coming here and said he served here. His name was Woody McGill, and he came into the tower, and we had a look round, and inside the tower we had a selection of photographs on the wall, and there was Rosie, Harry Crosby, 2 or 3 others who I can't remember at the present time, and one guy who we didn't know who he was. And he said, when he looked around, he said, "See that guy? That's me," pointing at the picture. And I said, "Well, we've learned something," because we didn't know who he was. So we had little surprises like this. And they went on, there's just so many of them. But I do remember that one. You got anything?
I recall when I was working on some houses in Thorpe Abbott's village. I was laying bricks, like you do when you're a bricklayer. That is what you do. And this guy came up on the on the side of the road, and he shouted over. He said, "Do you guys know where the airfield is?" And I could tell he was an American straight away. So I walked down to meet him, and he said, "I was here during the war." I said, "Well, that's interesting." I said, "Because I'm one of the volunteers who are restoring the control tower." And so I asked him his name, and his name was Vance Boswell. And it turned out that he was the bombardier on Raunchy. And Raunchy, I think, crashed in Lake Constance. But he was. It was interesting to see that they just come in out of the blue.
Yeah.
They just come out of the woodwork, and it's so nice. Unfortunately, I was working, so I couldn't escort him to the museum. But he came along and looked around. But just things like that pop up. But any one person, I don't know. As a job, it's difficult to say one person.
Yeah, it is.
Any more memorable than the others.
In recent years, the veterans have got to an age when they were not able to go to come over here. Of course, we've had lots and lots of family members. An immense amount of family members have been here, and we've had some really should I say, emotional times here with these people who've come to see where perhaps grandfather or father, dad served, and surprising the detail and things we've been able to find out from them, and also we've been able to help them, like for instance to take a family to an area where perhaps their father or grandpa aeroplane stood, although perhaps the hard stand of course was no longer there. There's a depression in the field where the aeroplane would have stood, and as you can imagine, that can be quite a special and emotional occasion for families who now come along.
It's incredibly inspiring to see the work that you all do throughout the year to maintain the museum. I know COVID's had an unfortunate impact on your ability to open this year, and I was wondering if you could tell us about some of the projects that have gone on at the museum this year.
As you said, there's a lot of work we all put in here, various jobs. I mean, we do most of everything ourselves. Yes, we do get professional help in for any major building projects, which fortunately we haven't had anything what we would call major, but I did something like roofing repairs. We would have a specialised contractor come and do repairs, but painting, decorating, cutting the grass, general keeping everything in good condition and the buildings in good order. The volunteers have always done this, and we still continue to do that. So it's a never-ending process. It's something like perhaps like the Forth Bridge in Scotland. It's never-ending because the time you've finished and got to one end, you have to start again. And that's something like it is here. But there's lots of other things going on, of course. I mean, you know, Matt, with the foundation, there's so many things have to be dealt with beside doing work like you are on the archives, looking at pictures and photographs. You have to deal with your membership, produce the newsletter, things we do here. The only difference, perhaps from your side, you haven't got a museum and buildings here like we have here. So because of this COVID-19 lockdown, of course we had to shut down because we had to just lock down for 3 months to keep safe. We felt at the time, because most of our volunteers are 70 plus, the wrong side of 70, that we had to consider their health and well-being. And indeed, a lot of them, or most of them, were apprehensive about getting mixed up with people who would be coming to visit, subjecting them to any danger from this. And also, many of their family members perhaps have got underlying health problems which they wanted to steer clear of this. So we decided to take a break, shut the museum down. Fortunately, over the years, we had set aside monies as a safety net, as it were, to support the museum if something like this, although we never ever realised that something this was going to come and affect the whole world. But in case of a disaster, a rainy day, as they might say, that we would be able to sustain this. And as I was saying to Richard earlier, many years ago, the foundation members were so generous in giving monies to this museum and our project here to restore what they for the ongoing maintenance of the place. And they also always said that we should keep some of that money to one side so it would be there in case we needed it for something like this. And indeed, that money is there for that purpose. So, I mean, Richard himself here, if I may say, has been still working with your photograph collection, cataloguing much like you are, writing things down, making a record, because we've got to think about those who are coming on in the future. If we don't write down, make a record of what we know, that will be lost, won't it? So we need. So these are the things we've been doing in between, and also, of course, we shall be now got to think about next year. By hook or by crook, we're going to open up in 2021 and do whatever we're going to do. We want to get the people back here to see and learn and a little bit more and catch up with what's been happening at the museum and learn more for the new people to learn something more about the 100 Bomb Group and what went on all those years ago. Richard, you better add some more to that.
Well, I was just going to say what you touched on. I mean, this really hasn't made too much difference to me, because this last couple of years, when I come up here on a Sunday, every Sunday, I go straight to the computer. I delve straight into the photographs, and I'm going through them photograph by photograph by photograph, and giving each one a title or describing what I see on there. Because like Ron said, when he and I are gone, the new people are going to come. Yes, they're going to see these pictures or photographs, and they're going to think, well, what's that? I wonder where that one was. What's that guy doing? What's that playing? And no, they won't have to do that, because it's all on there. Well, the ones that we know, there's a lot that we don't know, as I'm sure is the case for you. But I think my stand here is possibly your stand over there, where we are looking after our photographs like you're looking after your photographs. And between the two of us, we've got quite a nice collection between us. So, but yeah, COVID-wise, it really hasn't made too much difference to me as I've been coming up here.
Are there any plans on the horizon for additions to the museum?
Well,
The film, I guess.
well, I mean, we don't know really. I mean, with the Masters of the Air production, which is ongoing, and we feel that possibly, well, I'm pretty sure that we will be going to get a few more visitors here to Thorpe Abbots. So we want to learn something about the 100 Bomb Group. And one of the projects we got in mind is to enlarge our car park just a little bit. Just to, because actually on a weekend, we do get times, don't we, when we get a little bit pushed for space. So we're gonna enlarge that. Not that that's got anything to do with the museum exhibitions as such, but we need to do that. We believe there has been talk and discussion, although that's got nowhere as yet, that we possibly would put an extension on one of the buildings because we may be in a position to put some more items here on display, but that's not, well, we just talked about doing that. There hasn't been any real discussion yet, but there's a possibility that will happen in some time. But we don't want to make the museum too big. We don't want to, what's the right word? Perhaps destroy what is here by making it bigger than that needs to be. To many people, this is a very special place. Of course, it's a special place to us. Bigger is not necessarily better. A lot of people say this place has got an atmosphere, a special atmosphere. Perhaps it's all to do with the legend of the 100 that has grown up over the years, the hard luck outfit, the bloody 100, because people still, our visitors, talk about that. But other than that, no, we're changing some displays around, putting some new things on display, which we do anyhow. Turn things around a bit. Other than that, we're just doing what we do best, I hope.
Well, I can't wait to see some of the updates that you guys have made over the past year. And needless to say, I'm eager to get back as soon as I can. When I think back, I've been fortunate enough to have been able to make the trip to Thorpe Abbots with some of the veterans from the 100th Bomb Group. And, you know, they're not just visiting their old base. it's like they're visiting a second home. And when I get to see them interact with you guys, you know, they're really interacting with family. And I think that itself just really speaks to the special bond that you guys have with the veterans of the 100th Bond Group.
I'd agree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
exactly.
that's like our visits to the reunions over the years. Yeah, they're very special.
Yeah.
And even the ones now, of course, I know Richard hasn't been to some of the later, but even the little Balm Springs Museum get-togethers, little I call them, they're not that little sometimes, but we had some wonderful times over there. And indeed, these last few reunions we've had, like you well know, our veterans are passing now very quickly, and yeah, it's sad. It is sad to lose them, but hopefully between the museum here and the foundation, we between us can keep the memory there and get younger family members involved, and they can join your organisation, or hopefully one day perhaps be able to come to the UK and come and visit the place where their ancestors served, etc. Like I said, Richard and I won't be here, no doubt, but there'll be somebody here to welcome them.
I'm going forever.
You're going forever?
Yeah, I won't get rid of me.
All right. I'll have to put up with him for a few more years then.
You guys are the best. I can't say enough about how much I appreciate what all the volunteers have done at Thorpe Abbott's over the years. It's just really, really inspiring to see. And thanks again for taking a few minutes to talk to me.
I'm so glad we were able to do this, Matt. Thank you for saying that.